Jazz.
Hi, everyone. Just make sure that sounds all right. Yeah. Thank you. I run Roza's Gourmet, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit tonight about my story. When I tell people that I run a sauce business, there's usually at least 10 follow-up questions, so hopefully you'll get answers to all of those tonight. And it's a real pleasure to be in a room full of entrepreneurs and or budding business owners, so hopefully you get a few takeaways from my experiences as well. So, getting started at the start, that's me and my family. So Roza's Gourmet is actually named after my mum, Roza. It was started from our family property at the Gap when I was just 4 years old. So she made a small range of gourmet products from our property using fresh free-range eggs from our chooks, honey from our bees, herbs from the garden, and she actually sold them under a beach umbrella on the way up the mountain, on the way up to Mount Nebo, just to the passing traffic, which at the time was mostly bikies. And it became a bit of a family affair. So I would tie the ribbons on the tops of the jars because I had the littlest fingers. Mum was a culinary expert. She was making products like aioli and béarnaise and pesto. Somehow, even 25 years ago, she had these products that she came up with, just made them using fresh natural ingredients from home. And over the years, we expanded from the end of the drive down to the South Bank markets, and you can see my fabulous father selling ice to the Eskimos. He was actually gone from a pharmacist turned into a sauce seller, so he was selling our mayonnaises and pestos in our growing range. So we grew selling to local shops, gourmet fruit shops and delis, and then of course at the markets on the weekends. And it was a fantastic home business. It was something that I just grew up around. So I never thought having a family or a business at home was anything special. If anything, it was a bit of a drag, because anyone here that's come from a background in family business, it's sort of like the Western word for slave labor. It's like a polite way of saying it. So, so I just grew up around it, and I had so many people saying to me, even when I was, 10 years old, like, oh, when you grow up, you're going to take over the family sauce business. I was like, no way. I'm going to be, an actor in Paris and doing so many more exciting things, hanging out at markets every weekend and labelling jars at the dining room table, taking off the tops of chilies when I got home. That was like the furthest thing from my mind. Yet here we are. So things don't always go as planned. It did grow organically. We had a lovely customer base, and though I didn't plan to end up running the business, I triumphantly proclaimed to my father when I finished high school that I was going to go and study acting and pursue my dreams of being an actor overseas, and he very politely told me that was not a very good idea because I won't make any money and I won't like being poor. So it was a strong vote of confidence from my father at the time. I decided to rein it in. I went and did a business degree, fell into a corporate job at PricewaterhouseCoopers, hated that, went back to study acting, and it was sort of while I was working as an actor in Brizzy that then died at mid-70s at the time, and we'd kept the business going over all these years, said to me, well, how about you take over the business now? Because, clearly the acting thing's going nowhere. So it was about that time. A pivotal point in the business was when I was 14 and my mum actually passed away. So it was in 2001. So it was sort of about 10 years later. Then Dad and I had really kept the business in, I suppose you could say, caretaker mode, kept it going, selling to the local shops and the markets, and had someone making the products for us from a little kitchen down the road. But it was really hard going, and the heart and soul had really gone out of the business for us then too. So it was 2011, and I became a reluctant entrepreneur, as the story goes. I knew I had to do a few things because I said to Dad, I don't know anything about food. How can I do this? This isn't my life plan. I don't know anything about food. What am I going to do? So I had to sort of think strategically, and I had a few things in mind at the time. We needed to re-engineer the product range because since the 90s, while Mum had come up with some amazing varieties of products, things like sun-dried tomato dressing and satay sauce and Dijonnaise were no longer like the flavour of the month. I learned very quickly that, food comes in waves and trends, so we needed to adapt if we were going to stay relevant. Only make products we could be the best at, so our mayonnaises and pestos are really our key point of difference, so that became my focus in extending and building on the existing product range. and literally bringing manufacturing back in-house. So linoing the floors and the walls and getting secondhand cold room panels. So I took out a $20,000 overdraft, set up a kitchen in the downstairs room where Mum used to make them, hired a chef, the best I could afford at the time, re-engineered the range, and got cracking at making the products just the way Mum would have made them was she still around. The other critical aspect was to rebrand. From doing markets and tastings all those years in local shops, I would always say to people, oh, have you tried Roza's sauces before? And they would say, oh, no, but I recognise the jar. So the one thing we really had going for us was that we had glass bottles with black and white labels, and that was pretty much all people knew. So in doing a rebrand, if I completely changed the look, we were going to lose the small customer base that we already had. It needed to be modern and attractive. It needed to be appealing so people would buy the jar without me actually being there in person to tell them how good it is and to buy it. And also being a premium product, appearance is everything. And diversifying the sales locations. So we needed to start selling interstate to diversify risk, having all your business in one city. Besides, all my friends were moving to Melbourne, so it seemed like a logical choice. If I'm going to go down to visit them, maybe I can sell a few sauces while I'm down there. So I got a little esky together and I would go down, and it just started the way we did it in Brisbane, and I just would walk along the streets in first Fitzroy and Collingwood and, North Melbourne, and drop into local gourmet grocers and delis and introduce myself and the story behind the products and give them a try. And it wasn't really until people in Melbourne started saying wow, these are really good, and they actually started ordering them, that I thought, well, hang on a minute, I kind of fell into this and I'm making the best of it, but I think these products are actually really good. I'd never bought a jar of mayonnaise before in my life, so I kind of just expected that was what mayonnaise tasted like. So I learned pretty quickly that, hey, if the snobs in Melbourne can enjoy it, then maybe we're onto something. It just took a big step for them to say, you make it in Brisbane? I was like, yes. And they're like, well, how do you get it here? I'm like, on a truck. Weird. It's not that hard. So once I got a few people in Melbourne, I decided, okay, that's a sales model. We're going direct. I have no idea how I'm going to get it to them, really. The truck somehow, get distribution network going, but I need to set that up, get the sales now, get the distribution network later, and then, if it goes well in Melbourne, then it'll go well in WA and New South Wales. And so really, I sort of set the business up from the start with a really clear market positioning. I was very clear on the fact that we were gourmet, all Mum's recipes, like I told you, aioli, béarnaise, pestos, really premium, unique products, but very free from. People were asking me all the time, oh, but, mayonnaise, doesn't that contain dairy? I was like, no, eggs don't come from cows. What's wrong with you? But then a lot of mayonnaises actually do have milk solids, so I put dairy-free on the label and vegan on the label and gluten-free on the label, and so it became a core part of our messaging, as well as, of course, hand-selecting our stockists the way I was doing it, making sure that, we're only using the freshest ingredients and expanding our range under our brand. Well, I learned a few things along the way. Initial shipments to Melbourne were in styrofoam boxes that I would steal from the back of fruit shops after 9 p.m. and pack them with little the crates from the eggs that we would use for the mayonnaises. And we've improved a little bit since then. In 2013, we were able to move out of home, thank goodness, for my sanity, to a premises in Sumner Park. So we have the factory there now, and that was a huge step. We were able to upscale the Hilux to a little truck there, and I even got my forklift license eventually, because at first the premises was so big, 440 square metres. We'll never fill this. I remember it's at the top of the hill, and every time I would drive up, I would just imagine closing it up for the last time because we've gone completely bankrupt and it's all failed. It's really motivating feeling when you drive to work, thinking about how it's all going to fail very soon. So I didn't think we'd need all the space. I'd completely overcapitalised. What was I doing? It was all wrong. But sure enough, soon we needed to get pallet racking in and forklifts, and in a couple of years we actually grew out of it, and I was fortunate enough to get the adjoining building, put a little hole in the wall, two become one, and now we have the two premises, and we've actually expanded out of that as well. And that was one of our staff photos then too. So where are we now? We've got over 800 stockists nationally. That's some of the pins of where you can buy us, somewhere near you, I would say. And aside from Australia, we sell overseas. So we're in Singapore, Hong Kong, the UAE, and Shanghai. It's a growing part of the business. The majority of our sales are still very much in Australia, but that's where I've been spending my time. The last probably 4 years, I've been traveling around maybe 40 flights a year around the country, just literally walking shop to shop in Sydney, Newcastle, Launceston, Cairns, Townsville, Fremantle. Hi, my name's Jazz. We make these products in Brisbane. It's named after my mum. They're all gluten-free and preservative-free. Would you like to have a taste? I'm pretty good at it. And one of the things my dad told me very early on, which I've always kept front of mind, is that people do business with people they like. So just being a lovely person meant that I got a fair few customers over the line. Then we had a great looking product and a good sales strategy to match. So we now have 13 sales staff across the country, and so my focus in the last year or so has been more on growing the business internationally and growing our product categories. That's where we've come from since 2011. The growth this year so far is over 75% on the year prior, so it's fairly stressful. I would be lying if I said this was a, complete success story, because it looks like this on the way up. So lots of highs and lows, but we now sell over 100,000 products every week. I've got over 55 staff, and like I said, over 800 retailers nationwide and overseas stocking the products. So what did I learn? I've kind of achieved a few things in the last 8 or 9 years. One of the big takeaways, like I told you, there's been ups and downs. Sometimes we need to lose the small battles in order to win the war. And I know it sounds really trite. People always say, every mistake is a learning opportunity. But I honestly believe that, I really do, because if I hadn't have made some of those stuff-ups along the way, I wouldn't have grown, I wouldn't have course-corrected, I wouldn't have known how to make the right decision when it came to the crunch. So I'm a really big fan of no regrets. And everything along the way, I'm so grateful for those times that I was in a motel room crying because one of my staff was suing me for unfair dismissal and I didn't have any money. That was really good. That was a good thing, because then I read my employment agreements inside out. I knew exactly what I needed to do next time. I kitted myself up with an HR advisor. Little things like that just over the years accumulated to a success story. It genuinely doesn't happen without mistakes. Some of the other things is focusing on the small wins. I'm really not a big fan of people saying you need to have a 5-year plan. If someone had told me, 5 years ago, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I probably would have thought bankrupt. I certainly wouldn't have thought in the adjoining building and selling overseas and hundreds of thousands of products. I don't know about you, but I don't think that big. I probably, when we were making them from home, wouldn't have thought there would be a point when we weren't making them at home, or maybe somewhere smaller, but out of home. So it just sort of, having the little wins along the way, you can acknowledge where you're doing things right, you can learn, you can course correct, because ideally you're all in growing businesses. So growing means it's changing, and you just fixating on one point, it can be daunting, it can seem inaccessible. Those days when everything just gets too hard, it just really cannot be helpful. So, you need to treat it like a marathon. If you focus on the finish line, you've got 40 Ks ahead of you, it's just not helpful. You've got to count every lap and be proud of what you're achieving. Getting to know your customers, that's my biggest takeaway, really. No one will ever be as passionate about your brand as you are. And I've learned that over the years. I've got 13 fantastic sales staff, but my brand is mine and it's my story, and that's what people are buying into. And they love dealing with the owner, and they love the fact that I can tell them everything they need to know about the history of the products and the direction of the brand. And there's just a passion behind it that, no one else in your business can deliver. And a lot of business owners get into business because they have a technical skill, because they're a really good accountant, or they're really good at coding, or they're, a chef. And so there is a tendency for business owners to get stuck on the tools. and hire other people to do that sales stuff that they don't want to do. But when you're selling a brand or a product or a service, people are buying into you. There's 3 other takeaways which I haven't quite mastered, and every entrepreneur that I've spoken to, I've got to know a few over the years. Cash flow, staff, and stress seem to be the 3 that come up consistently. There is no remedy, but fast-growing business means you're fast to run out of cash. That is a chronic problem, and like I told you, there were many days when I would, not pay myself, like Saul said, didn't pay myself for the first couple of years. Crying because I couldn't afford to pay the bills and the staff in the same week. What was I going to do? Some really low points, but it comes with the territory. And knowing that really, you may have people around you, you may have great loyal staff, but at the end of the day, they don't have as much skin in the game as you. So never be content to fail, thinking that someone is going to pick you up. Unfortunately, they probably won't. And people reach their expiry. Some of the things that I learned too, I've made some great hiring decisions. And a couple of years down the track, I've been like, oh my God, this person is a nightmare. And I don't look back on it and think, gee, I hired the wrong person, because often we hire the right person at the right time, especially if you're in a growing business. That's one of the biggest takeaways I had. The chef that I hired when we were making them in the kitchen at home, and he had to make the products and fill them and lid them. He's a 28 punk rocker guy, and he couple of times made the tomato chutney with salt instead of sugar. It's a bit of a stuff up, but probably, for what I was paying for the situation of the job, that was literally the best I could do at the time. I don't regret that. You can't always have the ideal staff member straight away, and sometimes, you just need to know when you've outgrown those people. And of course, you'll never stop having the pressure of doing everything for the first time. It doesn't get easier. Unfortunately, I kept telling myself, only when I get this person hired, and then when we get this turnover, and then when we get more space, everything will be better. That doesn't seem to be a thing. And yeah, the constant feeling of the pressure. But every entrepreneur I've spoken to, everyone I know that runs a business, every speaker that I've heard talking about their entrepreneurial journey, they have some way of releasing that stress. And a lot of the really good, successful people, Warren Buffett, those type of people are saying things like, they meditate or they do yoga, something that, I can fit yoga in, and I walk my pugs in the afternoon, and I make sure I get 8 hours sleep. That's my thing. If I don't sleep, then I'm just not in the right mindset to make the right decisions. So figuring out what's right for you, what you need to fill your cup so that you can deliver for your business, because no one else will. That's me.